Hello everyone and welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Josh, joined today by Ewan Patterson, and may the 4th be with you. We thought it was the absolute perfect day to bring you some Star Wars news, and just like Star Wars, as all things should be, this is very balanced because we've got some good news and also potentially some terrible news, honestly, some not good news at all, but Ewan has more for us. Ewan, break my heart, but also, give me a little slap on the bum and tell me I'm a good boy. What's going on?
That's very kinky. This has been a bit of a sad week for me in terms of Star Wars, or an emotional week at least. Last week we reported on Star Wars Battlefront 2 not getting any more content updates, which I'm really sad about. That 5,000 kill Darth Maul challenge, I'm on 800 kills right now, and I think I've seen through space and time, so that's where I am currently with the game. And then obviously Clone Wars aired its final episode today. I still haven't watched it, so yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that later on. And then today, we've caught up on a report from the Bespin Bulletin, which I've been told is meant to be reliable, that Jedi Fallen Order 2 could be EA's final Star Wars game because Battlefront 3 is not in the works as things stand, which is a massive bombshell given that it was always kind of the nailed-on Star Wars game, I thought. Back when we were reporting on Fallen Order getting a sequel in the wake of its massive, success at launch, that was kind of like, that's really pleasant, they'll have something to go with Battlefront 3 now. But apparently, according to Bespin Bulletin, that isn't happening. From the post they put up on Instagram a few days back, they said, what I've been hearing is there is no Battlefront 3. Most of the team at DICE are working on that were working on Battlefront 2 will be shifted to Battlefield 2021, a game that EA are determined to make a return to form on. So it's been a tough week for me, Josh. I'm not, it's just Battlefront 2's gone, and then Clone Wars gone, and then Battlefront 3, getting that either. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
You would, like always, you know what, Star Wars and EA, they both giveth and taketh, so it does obviously suck that there's going to be no Battlefront, but I feel like for this, if you looked at the timeline of EA's Star Wars games and knowing that the license was always going to expire and be up for renegotiation at the end of 2023, 10 years after they initially got it, it made sense for me. It's sort of, I was worrying about Battlefront when it missed Battlefront 3 releasing last year. Not that it missed it, but the fact that EA didn't have a Battlefront ready for the final Star Wars film was huge, because the previous two Battlefronts were there for the past two entries in the trilogy. And for a time that was kind of perhaps promising, because it looked like they were committed to Battlefront 2 and not making a third game until they were ready. But now it does kind of seem as though they're winding down production on Star Wars in general and refocusing on their other franchises, because after their sports games, Battlefield is their biggest franchise and they want that to be back on peak form. But I do think that might come at the expense of Star Wars in general, because the only projects that we know about are, like you said, Fallen Order 2, which I am really looking forward to, and Project Maverick, which again is like a flight simulator, a much smaller Star Wars game.
Done by EA Motive.
Yes, which could genuinely be cool, but not quite the bombastic, explosion of another Battlefront or another game on that AAA level. So that does make me wonder whether they're even going to renew the license at all. This is purely conjecture on my part, but we've heard rumors for a long time that the license itself has kind of been more trouble than it's worth for EA. Apparently, it doesn't make them as much money as you might think, and they've had a lot of, high-profile cancellations. They've had a lot of high-profile disasters that thankfully they've managed to turn around, and you could argue that their only out-and-out success is the original Fallen Order, because as much as, Battlefront 2 has its community now, it took a long time to get there, and I wonder whether for the average player that might have soured them on the brand in general. I don't know, but it is huge that they aren't ending this cycle with a third Battlefront game, because they did sell, regardless of the controversies, they did sell a lot, the community is there, so I wonder whether it's just a timing thing, because they've only got 3 years before the license expires, and you would assume they want them out at the end of 2022, if anything. There's a lot of things up in the air. I'm very fascinated by all of the inner workings of this deal, so I am very much rambling here, but it's fascinating to see how this entire license has been handled over the past 7 years going into 10 years.
Yeah, it's mad to think that it's been that long as well. Like, I remember when, we had the first announcement, like, ages ago, and it's kind of wild to me that the output has been I'm not going to say dismal. I mean, in terms of quantity, you would have expected more than 3 major console releases for EA to do on Star Wars. I think at the start of the decade we were looking at like 4 or 5 at least. So it's a bit mad, and it kind of leaves me in that general grievously situation where I'm more like, what's the situation? Because what is the situation? Do EA value the Star Wars license? Will they go back to Disney and ask for more? Because we know that Disney themselves, they kind of don't want anything to do with video games. They want to have this, apart from Marvel, who have their own Marvel games department, who then shop the Marvel license around to different publishers and studios, as we've seen in Spider-Man PS4 and then Marvel's Avengers later this year. Star Wars isn't operating on the same level. It's much more entwined, I want to say, with the Disney hierarchy, which may give, some cause for speculation that maybe EA will go back to it. I think if you look at Battlefront and Battlefront 2, the sales numbers were massive for those games, and Fallen Order was a pleasant surprise for them as well. So yeah, it looks as though Battlefront 3 is on the back burner right now. The bulletin mentions in the actual post itself that it's very possible that very possible I should emphasize, that EA and Lucasfilm come to an agreement, but even if that is the case, work on another Star Wars title after Fallen Order 2 will not begin until a new deal is set in stone. So in that hypothetical world, we could be waiting until 2024 or 2025, more, probably more feasibly, before the next Battlefront comes out. And there are all sorts of different things that are going in. The conjecture and speculation regarding whether or not EA will want to continue their deal with Disney. I mean, there has been rumors for the past few years now that Fallen Order could potentially get a TV show spin-off, which, if that happens, that kind of further embeds the ties, I want to say, between EA and Disney. If they see value in what Respawn did for the franchise and the saga, who's to say that they are, we'd be happy for you to continue this. Battlefront 2 had that massive controversy at launch, but then you turned it around and you have Fallen Order. If you can continue that trend, then maybe it's worth it. But again, it is a numbers game at the end of the day. If the numbers don't add up for EA, that might be a concern. But then again, I know loads of people want Star Wars to go to someone else, but I really enjoyed Battlefront 2 and I really enjoyed Fallen Order, so in a rock and a hard place.
I do think what you mentioned there about Disney is very salient to this whole thing, because unlike Marvel, like you said, they haven't really dipped their toes in the gaming world, and when they have, it's kind of been a little half-assed. They're very rarely hands-on with their projects. They canned stuff like Disney Infinity and like those studios because they just didn't want to directly work on video games, and then they've had the Star Wars license exclusively at EA, which again is very different from what Marvel has been doing over the past few years. But I wonder whether they're just content with that and they want to pursue EA to renegotiate that deal or shop it around. I do think ultimately, as mad as it sounds, this is probably the best thing for Battlefront in general, because I think it shows at least some understanding or some reserve on EA's part to not rush another one out before this deal expires. They very much could have. They very much could have said, look, it expires in 2023, so we need one out in 2022. Just go for it. But they haven't done that. Instead, they've made sure the team is working on Battlefield and make sure that game is going to be as good as it can be, and not just kind of, half-ass out a sequel just to make that last bit of money before it goes ahead. And hopefully this will result in them, if all things go well for EA, them renewing the deal and then being able to put a full team back on Battlefront 3. And yeah, it'll take a while and we might all have gotten over it by then, but at least that will be as good as it can be and hopefully won't make the same mistakes that it has here. Because if you contrast this with someone like Activision, who at the end of their Tony Hawk's license literally rushed out Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 so it could cling onto it and get a game out before.
This is.
I know. But this could have Ewan, right? What I'm trying to say is this Star Wars Battlefront 3, had it been made and come out, could have been the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 of the Star Wars universe, is all I'm saying. If it was rushed.
Perfect sense. It's perfect sense. It's the perfect comparison. I'm not even joking. It is literally the perfect comparison. I did kind of want to say as well that the DICE developers, since the news broke last week that the Scarif update will be the last one on Battlefront 2, they don't seem relatively too pleased about support for the game ending. The community's been very vocal on Reddit and on social media, basically being like, why has this come to an end? It's kind of obvious that we had more planned, and every time you've seen like developers reacting, it definitely feels as though the decision was out of their hands. And we've also seen how some members of the team who worked on Battlefront 2 are now no longer at DICE. So, I completely agree. It's good long-term planning to not start a video game before, you don't want to rush something out before the license is done, like you just said. But I do definitely feel for people on Battlefront 2. I think the thing here is that I don't see why EA couldn't have continued support for that game, even on a smaller capacity than what it had done for the past 2 years, rather than just basically getting all of DICE to make Battlefield. It just seems a very weird thing, especially if we're not getting a third Battlefront game for a good long while now. Battlefront 2 could have sustained itself for a very long time, and I think the main concern here, even though it does make sense for them to hold off maybe, is the idea that this Battlefront 2 game will not be getting support or content updates or whatever for however long, and EA are not going to have a Battlefront for the next 4 years possibly, which is a big thing.
No, you're right. It's it's a tricky thing to kind of pass out, I think, because on the one hand, it's great for Battlefield that it's getting all of these developers, but when that comes at the cost of these other projects, whether it's support on Battlefield 5 or Battlefront 2, it kind of makes you wonder whether EA has a long-term plan, because Battlefield 6, or whatever it's going to be called, we know that's been in development for a while now. We know it's been in development probably since Battlefield 5 shipped, so the fact that it's so late in the day in its final year of production to then get all of these extra bodies on it, I don't know whether that is a kind of last-ditch Hail Mary to make sure it's, their best game and they're putting all their eggs in one basket, or has that been the plan forever? Because it doesn't sound like it, like you said, from what the developers are saying, who have said they wanted to support it for years to come and then have essentially just been plucked out of that and chucked into a different studio. I'm sure we'll find out more in the coming weeks and months, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you want EA to have the license for another 10 years after 2023 comes to the end? And are you looking forward to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order 2? And are you grieving? Are you general grievousing over the demise of Star Wars Battlefront 3? On that Star Wars joke, I've said Star Wars a lot here. I'm going to wrap this up. I've been Josh. You can follow me on Twitter at JoshBroom with 2 O's, joined by Ewan, who you can follow on Twitter at
Ewan Ruins Things.
And we will see you soon, hopefully, if Ewan hasn't murdered me for making these terrible jokes.
Grievous-ing.
Goodbye.
It's not even the same as grieving. It's grievous.
Hit the button. Hit the